Okay, the next topic that we want to look at is color. And this is actually a relatively complicated topic. So you may, if you need to, you may end up wanting to watch this video more than once. But we'll see how it goes. Okay, we want to first look at the topic of what's called selective reflection. Now, most of the things that we see in the world are not emitting light. Instead, they're reflecting light. Now, if you look up at the sun is actually emitting light. If you're looking at a campfire, the campfire is actually emitting light. But if you're looking at a tree, the tree is not emitting light. Instead, what's happening is the sunlight is coming and it's hitting the tree and reflecting off of it, and you're seeing the light that's reflected from the tree. Now, we know that the light coming from the sun has all the possible colors of the rainbow. But if you see the light reflected off, say, the leaves of a tree, they might be green, for example. What does that tell you? It tells you that the colors that are not green got absorbed by the leaves, and the color green actually got reflected. This is what we mean when we talk about selective reflection, that when white light is incident on something, only certain colors get reflected, and those are the colors that you will see. What happens to the other colors? They get absorbed. Now, interesting, let's look at another example, like maybe a rose. And so in our description here, it says, the petals of a red rose reflect only red light. That's just in line with what we were just talking about. That's why we see those petals as red. Now, if you shine other colors on it, so for example, if you have a red rose and you shine blue light on it, the rose will appear brown or black. But if you shine red light on it, the rose will appear red. That's because if you shine blue light on the rose is going to absorb that blue light, so you don't see the blue light reflected back to you. But if you shine red light on the rose, the red light will be reflected back to you. It doesn't get absorbed, it gets reflected back, and that's why you would see the red light on the rose. Now, imagine you had a card that had these two squares printed out on it, and so you've got a white square and a black square. The square on the top that's white, it's able to reflect all the possible colors. So if you shine a blue light on this white square, you would see blue. Like imagine you had a white index card and you painted one square black and you had another square that was just the white of the index card. If you shined a blue light on that white part of the index card, you would see blue there because that white surface can reflect the blue. But if you shine that blue light on the black surface, it would not reflect. The black is going to absorb it and you would just see black still. Now, if you take that card and you go outside and you put it on like a picnic table and the sunlight is shining on it, and you put a thermometer over the black and over the red, you would find that the black would actually get warmer than the white. The reason is because the sunlight is coming and it's reflecting off of the white part of the card, and so the white part of the card isn't absorbing as much light and it doesn't warm up as much. The black part basically absorbs all the colors and it's going to warm up more because it's absorbing more light. Now, if you remember earlier in the semester, we talked about the Kirchhoff rules, that good absorbers are good emitters. And that would be true too, that actually if the sun went down and you had your card still on that table, the black square, which is warmer, it's going to actually cool off faster because the black is better at not only absorbing light, that means it would be better at emitting the color. And so it's going to be emitting thermal radiation better than the white, and it would actually cool off faster. Now, we've talked about selective reflection. The next thing that we want to talk about is what's called selective transmission. And this would involve things like if you've ever seen glass that was a different color. So not completely clear, but maybe the glass is tinted blue or tinted red or something like that. And the way that works is very similar to selective reflection. And so you can see in the image over here, it really is a nice description of it. You have a piece of blue tinted glass and you have white light incident on it. And we know that white light contains all the colors of the rainbow. And so the white light has all these different colors contained in it, but blue is the only one that is allowed to pass through. The other colors get absorbed by the glass. And what happens to the glass when it absorbs those colors? It warms up a little bit. The energy of the light in those colors, it gets absorbed by the glass, and so the glass warms up. Now, why is the glass blue in the first place? Generally, it's because when you make the glass, you put some impurities in it that consist of chemicals that are called dyes, or sometimes they're called pigments. And these chemicals absorb the colors that get blocked. And so they let the blue light go through, but they absorb all the others. And of course, if you have regular glass that's not tinted some color, it lets all the colors through, not just the blue, but lets all of them. But if you ever look at a piece of glass that's red or blue or green or whatever color, you know it's only letting that color through and the other colors are being blocked. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you pass light through a prism, you guys probably learned in grade school that the prism will break the light into all the different colors of the rainbow. Now, if you plot the brightness of every color versus its frequency, and remember, we know from previous discussion that what makes the different colors of the light is what frequency they are. If you plot the brightness of each color versus its frequency, you see a curve that looks like that. And you can see that the greens and the yellows, that's where the sunlight is the brightest. And so that means those colors have the most energy in them. And the reds and the oranges and the purples have less energy. And you can also see the range here from here to there is what we call visible light. A lot of what we would call violet light, or it looks maybe purple, but actually the color for the emitted light is, we call that violet. A lot of it is actually not able to be seen by the human eye. And most of what we call, and you can see a little bit of it is, but actually most of what we call purple is caused by color combinations, which we'll talk about later on. Regardless, we have all the different colors of the rainbow, and each one of those corresponds to a different frequency of electromagnetic wave that's traveling with the light. Now here we see the same curve, but it's a little simpler, and rather than showing you all the different gradations of color, it's divided into three main colors. It's divided into red, into green, and into blue. And these are what are called the three primary colors. Now, the reason that there are three primary colors is because in our eye, we have light-sensing cells called cones that are able to detect color. They're able to detect different frequencies, but they're only able to broadly detect three different colors, and they're the colors that correspond to red, green, and blue. So these are the colors that we can actually see with our eyes. These are the only colors that our eyes can detect. And yet, if you look over here, you can see something that is clearly yellow. So how is it possible that your eye is able to see what we call yellow if I just told you your eye can actually only see red, green, and blue? The reason for that is because what we actually see is different combinations. So if the light is right here, your eye would detect it as being red. And if the light were right here, it would be detected as green. But if the light was right here, both your red sensing cell and your green sensing cell would activate, and your brain would say, oh, there's some color that's a combination of red and green, and your brain would perceive it as yellow or maybe a reddish orange or something like that. And so you can see that by having different combinations of red, green, and blue, our brains can interpret what we see as a full range of different colors. So here we're going to look at what happens when you mix different colored lights together. So what you have here is 3 different projectors, one that can project red light, one that can project blue light, and one that can project green light. And so over here you see 3 circles, the one coming from the green projector, the one coming from the blue projector, and the one coming from the red projector. Now, they're offset a little bit so that they overlap in different regions. Right here in the middle, all 3 colors are overlapping. And you probably know from grade school that if all the colors add together, you get white light. And so when you add the red light plus the green light plus the blue light together, you get white light. Now over here you can see, just like we were talking about previously, if you add red light together with green light, you get the yellow that's in this intersection here. If you add red light with the blue light, you get this magenta color. And if you add green light with blue light, you get this cyan color. But all the colors that we see are combinations of the 3 primary colors, red, green, and blue. And you're probably looking at this on a computer monitor or maybe a tablet screen or something like that. In those screens are what are called pixels that are little bitty light emitters. Each one is able to emit red, green, and blue. And so if the computer wants to emit the color yellow, it doesn't actually put out yellow, but instead it puts out a little bit of red and a little bit of green, and they add together and they make yellow, and that's what you perceive. And so, but the computer monitor or your screen can actually only emit the 3 colors that you're able to see, the red, green, and blue. But by having them in different combinations, that's how we get all the other colors. So the next topic that I want to talk about is something called complementary colors. And notice this is complement spelled with an E, not an I. If it was spelled with an I, you might be talking about a pretty color or a nice color. That would be a complement, a complementary color in that sense. But we're talking about something different here with an E. This is complementary with an E, complementary colors. And here's the idea. If I have white light, we know that that's going to be red plus blue plus green, all the 3 primary colors added together. Now, if I take away the green, I end up with red plus blue. And as we saw on the last slide, if you add red and blue together, you end up with magenta. And so white light minus green equals magenta. You could almost write that as an equation. And in that sense, we say that magenta is the opposite color to green. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you look at the spectrum from the sun, and so you get a prism out and you shine sunlight through it and you break it into all the colors of the spectrum, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, all of those different colors, you don't see magenta anywhere in that list. Remember we said that color is related to the frequency of the vibrations of the electromagnetic waves making it. There's no frequency at which you could shake a charge back and forth and make this color magenta. It doesn't come from vibrating charges. What it is, it's almost like a mental trick. It's what our brains perceive when you add blue light together with red light. You add blue light and red light together, you get magenta. Now, if I add different amounts of red and different amounts of blue together, I can get different shades of magenta. And you can kind of see this in the picture. Over here it looks a little bit more pink, and over here it looks a little bit more purple. These are all different shades of magenta, but they're all created by combining different amounts of red and blue light. But in a certain sense, we can say that magenta isn't a real color in the sense that there's no wavelength of light associated with it. It's just our brain interpreting different wavelengths being added together. Now, in what sense are they complementary colors? Okay, In order to explain what complementary colors are, let's remember something we talked about a couple of slides ago. If I add the primary colors together, I get different colors, and these are the possible combinations of adding together the three primary colors, red, green, and blue. If I add red and blue together, I get magenta. If I add red and green together, I get yellow, and if I add blue and green together, I get cyan. So these are the different ways that you could add complementary colors. Now let's look at that first one because that's the one we've been talking about. Red plus blue gives us magenta. That's missing green. Red plus blue plus green would give us white light. So that means magenta plus green would give us white light. And we actually see this down here. Magenta plus green equals white. And remember, the way you make magenta is you add red plus blue together. So magenta plus green is the same as red plus blue plus green, and all the colors added together give you white. Magenta and green added together give you white light. And that's what makes them complementary colors. So here's the rule, and I've got it up here in green. Two colors that add together and produce white are called complementary colors. And again, that's complementary with an E. Complementary colors are two colors that when you add them together, they make white. Some other examples, cyan plus red gives you white, and yellow plus blue gives you white. Again, for example, yellow is red plus green. Red plus green equals yellow. Red plus green plus blue gives you white, and that's what we see here. So again, complementary colors are two colors that when you add them together, they produce white light. Next, we want to talk about mixing colored pigments, which is different from mixing different colors. We talked already about glass that might have different pigments embedded, and that would make the glass look blue or red or something like that. And that was because the pigments in the glass, if you have blue glass, that means there are pigments in the glass that are absorbing the colors that are not blue, all the other colors. That's also how paint and ink and dyes and things like that work. They work by absorbing colors rather than emitting them. In the previous slide, we had like the projectors that were projecting the light on the wall, and we could add the blue light to the red light and see what color it made. Here, we have something like paint on a page. And what's happening is that if I look at red paint on a page, for example, the white light from the sun or from the overhead lights is shining down on that page and reflecting off of it. And where there's red paint, red is the one color that gets reflected and the other colors get absorbed. This is how different colored pigments produce their colors. They're actually subtracting all the other colors from the white light. Now, if you mix different pigments together, it doesn't work the same way as mixing actual lights together. And so, again, in the previous slide, we had like projectors that were projecting different colored lights, and we could make them overlap to mix them together. But here we're talking about having different colored paints. And so, if I mix red, green, and blue light all together, we know that's going to make white light. But if I mix red, green, and blue paint together, I don't get white paint. I get something that's kind of a muddy, dark brown. Clearly, the rules for mixing paint or mixing pigments is different from the rules for mixing light colors. And so an example can be seen here on this image of the bird. Now, what's a little bit fun and a little bit tricky here is that we have an ebook now. When you read your book, or if you're looking at this video, you're seeing it on a computer screen. And a computer screen is actually emitting its own light. And so the different colors that we see on the computer screen are produced in the way that we were just talking about, just like the projectors of light on the wall. And so the normal way of adding colors works. And so if you've got yellow, you know that the computer screen is mixing together the red light and the green light to make the yellow light. But the way the text is actually written is it's assuming that you're looking at this picture from a physical book, like paper with ink printed on it. And so the way that colors from ink work are quite different. And so, for example, if you're looking at a printed image on a page made out of ink, the green is actually a combination of yellow and cyan pigments. And just like there are three primary colors for light, there are actually three primary colors for pigments too. And the three primary colors for pigment are cyan, magenta, and yellow. And by combining the different pigments, that's how you make different colors with paints or with ink or things of that nature. Now here we see the same kind of overlapping color scheme to show us how different colors mix together. Now for pigments, as I said previously, our three primary colors are cyan, which is this bluish one here, that's cyan. This is the pinkish, purplish one is magenta, and then of course the other primary color is yellow. Now, in one of the previous slides, we had the three optical primary colors, red, green, and blue, and when you mixed them in the middle, you got white. Here, when you mix the primary colors for printing, cyan, magenta, and yellow, all together, you get black. Now, how does this work? Let's look at our example over here. So our example says red paint absorbs the color cyan. And remember, with regular colors, cyan is made up of blue plus green. And so you've got white light incident on the red paint, and it's absorbing the blue and the green, and it's leaving the red, which gets reflected. And so that's why the red paint looks red to us. The two colors that are absorbed, green and blue, those are the color cyan. And so effectively, if you have red, the color cyan, that is the blue and the green together, have been subtracted out from the white light. That's why printing colors, we say, are subtractive. And these three colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, we say they are the three subtractive primary colors. The ones for regular light, red, blue, and green, we say those are the additive primary colors because you combine them by adding the colors together. Here, what gets combined are the colors that get subtracted. If you have something, for example, that's painted blue, that paint actually absorbs the other colors, red and green. And we know red and green together, they make yellow. So blue paint absorbs the color yellow, and the blue light is the light that gets reflected. Now, here down below my overlapping circles, we can see the basic way that the different printing pigments work. Cyan pigment absorbs red light, yellow pigment absorbs blue light, and magenta pigment absorbs green light. Now, if you have an inkjet printer at home or maybe a laser printer and you have to buy ink for them, your computer will usually tell you that this color is out or that color is out. And the colors that you get are of course the colors used in printing, which are cyan, yellow, and magenta. And usually the cartridges are labeled with a C for cyan, a Y for yellow, and an M for magenta. Now, typically, they also use a separate cartridge for black ink, which is usually labeled with a K. And nobody's really sure why K is used. It's a very old standard. There are a couple of different theories, but I'm not going to go into that. Just know that the black ink is represented by the letter K. Now, why do you have a separate cartridge in your printer, for example, that has black ink, when we know that I can actually make black ink by combining the pigments for cyan, yellow, and magenta? Well, it turns out there's two reasons. One, that you can actually get a darker black with a separate ink with different chemicals in it. And the other reason is most of the things that you print are black. And so having a separate black cartridge filled with black ink, you will not run out of all the other colors as quickly. And so it's just more efficient to have a black cartridge because the black ink looks a little bit better than simply trying to make black by combining the other three colors, the other three sets of pigments. And also, it's not as wasteful because you don't want to run out of your different colors if you have a lot of color images you need to print as well. And here's, I think, one of the cooler pictures from our textbook. It's showing how this four-color printing process works. And so we have the three primary subtractive colors. There's the magenta, the yellow, and the cyan. And we have an image. And so you can see here's the final image here. And here's the same image printed with only the magenta. Here's the image printed with only the yellow. And here it's printed only with the cyan. Now, if you add them all together, so your printer were to print all of these three right on top of each other, those pigments would combine and you would see something that looks like this. And you can actually see all the different colors. But it looks a little bit muddied. And here's where the black comes in. You add this fourth printing with black, and that really makes the contrast pop. And so you can see some areas are lighter and some areas are darker. That's really what the black is giving you. It's giving you values of darkness. And so this is giving you all the different colors, but they're all kind of muddled together. The black enables you to really see, and so you can see, for example, the shadows here, and all of that makes the whole image pop, and it really gives you the complete representation of the image. And that's more or less how printing with different colors works, and that gives us a pretty good understanding of the process of colors, both adding regular colors and adding pigments, so the additive colors and the subtractive colors.